And broadcast. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Jessica, I'm one of the owners of the store, and we are so excited to host tonight's event with Nicole Dennis-Benn, launching the paperback edition of her new book, Patsy. She's gonna be talking with Imani Perry, so you are in for a really excellent evening. Before we start, I just wanted to say a huge thanks to everyone for making this happen, to the authors, to the publicists who helped put this together, and to all of you for showing up. Greenlight stores are closed right now, but our community is still here and the artists that we love are still here. And we're grateful to be able to provide a space for connections between them. We were just talking about, we've hosted Nicole in several different store spaces and now we're hosting her in this new space. So we're glad that you could all join us. A couple little housekeeping things before we get started. If you're just joining us now, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see your name, so they know you're here. And you can use the chat to share any comments that you want to share. Just let folks know that you're here, you know, express like enthusiasm for something you really like, or just chat there. If you have a question that you'd like for Nicole to answer in the Q&A, you can use the Q&A icon. So if you click on that Q&A icon, you can put your questions in there anytime during the event and we'll be answering those towards the end of the event. If you see a question that you think is great, you can also upvote it and that'll give it a better chance of getting answered in the Q&A towards the end of the event. We are recording tonight, so we'll be posting this video on YouTube tomorrow if you happen to miss any part of it. And very importantly, I want to let you know that tonight's featured book, Patsy, the new paperback edition, is available for sale from greenlightbookstore.com. So our bookstores are closed, but we're working with our supplier warehouse for really fast direct-to-home shipping. So if you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book on our website is a great way to show your support. And as an extra little incentive, we're offering a $5 off coupon on Patsy. If you purchase it from Greenlight's website this week, you can use the coupon code Patsy, P-A-T-S-Y, in the coupon field and get $5 off that book. So that's another reason to buy it this week. So let me introduce our panelists tonight. Our interviewer for this evening is Imani Perry. She's the Hughes-Rogers Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, where she also teaches in the programs in law and public affairs and in gender and sexuality studies. She's the author of several books, including Looking for Lorraine, The Radiant and Radical Life of Lorraine Hansberry, and Breathe, A Letter to My Sons. She's going to be speaking tonight with our featured author, Nicole Dennis-Benn. She's the author previously of the novel Here Comes the Sun, which she presented in hardcover and paperback at Greenlight. That novel won the Lambda Literary Award and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle John Leonard Award and the New York Public Library's Young Lions Fiction Award and the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize, and was longlisted for the International Dublin Literary Award. Born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica, she teaches at Princeton and lives with her wife right here in Brooklyn, New York, so we're proud to call her our neighbor. Her new critically acclaimed book, Patsy, which Greenlight also launched in hardcover, follows two women who crave a freedom beyond that which is available for them. The eponymous Patsy, who emigrates from Jamaica to New York in search of a better life where she can be and love whoever she wants, and True, the daughter that she leaves behind. So Nicole's going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then she'll be talking with Imani and taking questions from all of you. So please take it away, Nicole.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Jessica, and Greenlight Bookstore. This has been my neighborhood bookstore, so thank you so much for the support. And thank you, Imani, for joining me with in this conversation. It has been a pleasure and a dream come true as well. And thank you all, everybody, for showing up. I see everybody popping up, so thank you guys. So I'm gonna just read a very short excerpt of Patsy, the paperback, just to get into our conversation and you know, get things going. There are two types of devil's coal. One in which you cannot bring yourself to leave the room, much less the bed, to do the simplest things. And the other in which you go through the motions in a constant stupor. Patsy lies in bed, turned away from the dark, heavy thing that has returned, its shadow dimming the room. With the cover over her head, she closes her eyes, not wanting to see it. God knows how long she has gone without eating. She could die, she knows. though death doesn't seem that scary after all. Not as scary as the dark thing. Here in America, there are no bush teas for it. No bitter mix of ramgoat roses, rosemary, lemongrass, bissy, and other herbs. No pastor to come with a bottle of sanctified olive oil. No neighbor from the country who can wring the neck of a goat and sever it with a machete for you to bathe in its blood. No time to lie down and let it run its course. She's powerless against it. The real hell is allowing this place to eat you alive, Fiona says to Patsy, when she notices that she has been lying in the same spot on the bed inside their studio from sunup till sundown. How many rotations has the sun gone through since Patsy climbed in the bed that night after seeing Cicely? She slips in and out of sleep. She wakes to Fiona shaking her. Patsy, Patsy, Patsy. It reminds Patsy of her daughter's voice, how it would pull Patsy from the lips of a deep sleep, how she's in the midst of it, hating it, terrified of it, and yet her only thought is of true. During those years, it was the anticipation of going to America to see Cicely that had kept Patsy alive. But what is keeping her alive now? Where will she find the strength that would protect her from the spells? How can she live knowing that she lost Cicely to her American dream? It's then that what Fiona had said about not having the luxury of choosing love makes sense to Patsy. That's what it all comes down to, choice. When has she ever been given a choice? Never. She has never been given a choice to say no the first time her legs were pried open. Never given a choice to rid her body of the grievance she had to carry for 9 months. Never given a choice to look at another woman and allow herself to be carried by the feeling without blood, bright red on glistening glass, sticking to her like shadow. And now the promise of life comes with accepting the fact that she will never have a choice. That's it.
I want to begin by saying thank you for reading that part. As I read it, I wept. Really, this is such an extraordinary novel. So I want to thank you for it. And the first question I have is really about where you ended, which is, there's this trope of the long-suffering Black mother who, or woman, who gives absolutely everything, who expects nothing for herself, who, who's like, and Patsy is a woman who is attempting to choose herself, right? Her desire. And I guess at first I'm fascinated by that. I am grateful for it. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about her formation for you. I mean, did she come to you whole as this person who marginalized in so many ways, diminished, heartbroken, but there's something inside that keeps making her choose or want to choose herself?
Yes, thank you so much for that question, because even without knowing it, when I started writing Patsy, I was actually writing against that trope of that downtrodden black woman who lacks sexuality, the asexual Black woman. I was actually writing against that trope because I myself got tired of seeing it. And I also, being the daughter of mothers and grandmother, being a daughter, a grandmother, and knowing that these women are human beings. The Patsies of our society, our mothers, are human beings, and to give them sexuality, to give them yearning, is something that many of us in real life don't do. And as an artist myself, I wanted to do that. But in terms of how Patsy came to me, it was more of a confession. It was more like a one of those. It was a meditation, like, here this woman was telling me basically, what she was doing in America, going to her 9 to 5 as a nanny on the Upper East Side, the Upper West Side. And it started as her writing to her mother, "Dear Mama, Today I went to Central Park. There, Mama. Today I saw a Pride parade. You know, that was how Patsy came to me. But then what she was hiding was the fact that she had left a 5-year-old daughter back in Jamaica to come to America in search of her own freedom. And it was interesting to unpack that, because once I sat down to actually work with a character like a Patsy, a woman like Patsy who dared to leave her daughter behind, I myself had to challenge that. Ultimately, I was socialized as a woman in society as well, a Jamaican woman. And so for me to write a character like that, I was saying to myself, man, where's Patsy taking me? But, I'm so grateful that I was willing to follow her on that journey, because what she showed me is that she's human. She is a woman who was denied so much. Like, I just read this excerpt, she never felt like she had a choice in the first place. Here's a working class Jamaican Black woman who feels like, now it's time for her to actually salvage what was lost, what was taken away from her. And she looked to America for that. She looked to her lover, Cicely, for that. But ultimately, she was really looking to find herself, and I say this over and over again, I guess when looking back, stepping back from the novel, seeing that it asks one question, what do we lose or gain when we choose ourselves, especially as women, Black women, in terms of this context. She's not that altruistic immigrant. She wants to just find herself in a new place.
Yeah, and her motivation, I mean, one of the pieces that I also love is her motivation isn't, the standard story, right? That people come to America with the hopes of sending money back, right? That it's all sacrifice, that it's also a drive internally. And then the grief, right? The grief that she experiences, the love that is, that connection, right? That love and grief are often together for her, through her daughter, and for Patsy, and for Cicely. I mean, there's all of these moments where you see, even in the most intimate moments, that you feel the grief even when people are enmeshed with each other, right? Looking for love. There's also, I mean, there's so much that is, I think is also really detailed about the particulars of Patsy as an undocumented Jamaican woman in the United States, both before coming and arriving, that I wanted to get into, because although this novel is not like anything that I've ever read, which I love, it's completely new. But there's also these literary foremothers who I can feel in, like, and I thought about Zorana Hurston, because there's something so anthropological, right? So you give us a window into the different speech patterns of people from different parts of Jamaica, whether from the countryside or from Kingston. You give us a window into when people decide to speak patois and not, right? What is being cued there, the different, that it's not, that class is complicated, right? It's not just your job, but what your relationship is to the state and to, and to the various economies. Did you go in with saying, I'm going to show this kind of complex portrait, or was it just to tell the story true? No pun intended.
Yes.
You had to show the layers.
Yeah. Again, Imani, I love this question again, because when I'm sitting in front of my blank screen to create a story, any story, be it Patsy, Here Comes the Sun, or the new work I'm working on, it is to tell a story ultimately, because that's the goal. People buy the book because they want a story. Yeah. But I am also showing what I never saw on the page. I never saw my people on the page. I never saw myself, my experiences on the page. I mean, yes, I was an avid reader, and yes, I stepped inside the shoes of so many growing up in Jamaica, but I never saw Patsy's story. And so I wanted to humanize those people. And I often tell people all the time that I hate the word humanize, because we're all human beings. Mm-hmm. And, even like, the incident this week with George Floyd, and like how do you dehumanize, how somebody could actually sit on somebody's neck, thinking he's an animal, not a human being. For me, I want people to see that we're human beings, and where we live, the setting in which we were created, or cultural norms, or societal atmosphere. All of that is very important to document. Especially for the Jamaicans and the other writers coming of age right now, it's important for you to document it.
Yes.
Show people who we are, who you are. I often think, I think about photographers and filmmakers. How we can actually zoom in on where the habitats, where they exist. I do that for my characters. I do that for Jamaica. I do that for Kingston. I do that for fictionalized Pennyfield.
Yeah.
So that's really what I'm doing, because I was telling a friend the other day that Patsy was actually Pennyfield is loosely based off the garrisons in Kingston. Okay. We're talking about the garrisons in West Kingston, or maybe even Waterhouse, a little vineyard town where I grew up, Rollington town. It was based off those places, working class Jamaican homes or communities, and this was on the heel of what happened on May 10th in 2010 of Tivoli Gardens massacre. And those people came in, those cops came in and basically slaughtered whole families. And again, asking the questions, don't they see human beings living in these places, right? Yes, you may be poor. Yes, you may not have a job. You may sit on the corner and smoke your weed and all that. But at the end of the day, you're still human. And so for me to write that community of Pennyfield and Patsy, to bring it to life, to show that, yes, it's a ghetto, but it doesn't mean that people are savages. It means that they're human. You have a Pope who's telling true, Patsy's daughter, listen, I see potential in you. Yes, he might be a bad man, yes, but at the end of the day, he's saying, no, you need to focus on you going back to school, doing whatever you do. And so I wanted to make sure that individuals like that, that we're not walking away from the page saying, yes, I know they were savages in the first place. No. And so that's really the heart of what I do as a writer, still capturing the essence of our people.
And every character there's no villains, right? I mean, even someone like Pope, right? There are choices, there's constraints, there's questions that the reader may raise about the choices, but everyone is fully drawn. Even the minor characters, you get a sense of their interiority and why they make the decisions they do. And I mean, I think for me, relatedly, even the way that you depict desire, right, and queerness in the novel there's a you get that sense of the kind of strong emotional and erotic pull. So it's not just, a question of sexuality per se, but what does it mean at the deepest level to be drawn to another human being, right? And that's a complicated thing. And I also think, for me, I thought it was so beautiful precisely because of what you're talking about, because oftentimes poor Black people in the Caribbean and the United States and Africa are not imagined as having these complex interior desires, motivations, right? Yearnings that are, and you get that for everybody, right?
Again, I think it's important to have that, to document that, because honestly, Imani, when I read literary fiction, when I was, being in the MFA program and prior to that, I always sensed that, people were shied away from intimacy that way. They shied away from sexuality. And who gave me the permission to do that? Toni Morrison. When I read Toni Morrison's work, she does not shy away from that, especially, she wrote Black women, she wrote her sexuality on the page, and that inspired me. I really took that and ran with it. I was like, yes, finally, I can do that. And so she gave me permission. Of course, my other foremothers, Zora Neale Hurston, gave me permission. All those women gave me permission. And in terms of layering it, saying, yes, yes, I'm going to write queerness on the page. And yes, I'm going to write intersectionality on the page. It was more like saying to myself, you know what? I owe this to me. I owe this to me as that reader coming up wanting to see that. And it's so interesting because I was reading Searching for Lorraine, Hansberry, And there was that whole like section of like how she was, her writing queerness and her blackness in her fiction, and that like that anxiety that she had. Same with Baldwin, writing Giovanni's Room, and saying that I don't think my blackness and my queerness can fit into the page. Like it would have been too much for them. And I'm like, this is a new age, and because of those two, it paved the way for me, for Nicole Dennis-Benn to now say, I can actually, there is enough room for me to stuff all those things, all of my identities on the page. And I owe it to those readers who are coming up feeling that they ought to be doing the same thing. They can't be ashamed of their identities, because if we're ashamed of our identities, we are basically erasing ourselves. And so I can't afford to be erased any longer.
That's beautifully put. And I thought about Morrison as I was reading in a couple of places. I was especially with the scars on the physical. I thought about Setha and her choke cherry tree on her.
Yes.
Ways in which the wound is marked on the body throughout, and also with Barrington, I thought about Robert Smith and the space between departing from life and wanting to fly when things feel too you can see, I love that you can see the influence, but it's also very distinctly your voice. It's nothing it's just as wonderful. Do you have particular readers in mind, or do you feel like you're speaking to different audiences on different registers, or is that part of your process?
At first, when I sit down to write, I do think of I think of me. I write for myself first.
Okay.
And then I write for, whoever that I feel like needs to hear this. Because ultimately, yes, my stories they're from the point of views of Jamaican protagonists, these Jamaican working class protagonists, but ultimately they are tapping into that human experience, love, loss, displacement, desires, all of those things. But I was saying on an interview, I think it was Well Read Black Girl the other day, that inside this study where I'm writing, right now, I try my best not to think too hard, not to think too hard about the audiences. I want to stay true to the story ultimately, because audiences, good or bad, it could be a Jamaican audience, it could be an American audience, it could be a European audience, whoever the people are. I still feel like I still need to remain true to the characters first and foremost before I even think about any of that. But really, the person to tap into in terms of going deep to get my stories out is who I am. Like, who is Nicole Dennis-Benn? Who was she at 10 years old, craving an image of herself, craving an image of myself. I really wanted to see those experiences on the page, and know that I do have the ability to do that. That's where I go first and foremost.
I can see that, because they are so honestly drawn, and you delve so deep into the interior. And the thing that I find sort of remarkable is that, so oftentimes novelists can depict someone, but to depict someone's interior and have them be so distinct is special. And I also, I think it's interesting, because there's this sort of this lifelong grief about her mother's departure.
Yes.
But there's also this way in which she's like her in her core of insisting on being herself, right? Yeah. Through all the grief. And I feel like that there's a message in that, right, for all of us.
Yeah, it was just the irony of it all, of all the people who True could have turned to, especially as she was grappling with her own individuality. She, like her mother, defied the gender norms. Her mother defined the gender norms by ultimately going against the expectations of what mothers ought to be, or even who we are expected to be as women.
Women,
to be automatically good at motherhood, to want it, to desire it. And Patsy went against that. And then you have a True who is saying to herself, I am not a typical girl. She's gender non-conforming, but she would not say, I mean, that's not the language I use to describe True. But here she is, she prefers playing her soccer. She prefers hanging with her boys, her best boyfriends. Yeah. She prefers all of that as opposed to going to this all-girls school. And ultimately, if you notice too, that Patsy, before Patsy left, Patsy said to True, be a good obedient girl and I'll be back for you. And it was a promise, yes, but it was also a cage, and it was definitely a lie. And caging True within that gendered box that she herself was trapped in. Probably looking at her daughter saying, you know what, I don't want you to go through all of that. I don't want you to go through the violence. I don't want you to go through the negative assessments that I went through. So adhere to what society tells you, conform. And I think ultimately that was what Patsy was trying to do before she left. But True herself, without Patsy's presence, grew into herself. I gave her a community. I gave her Roy, her father, who allowed her to be free, allowed her to play her soccer, allowed her to just be True. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I realized that he might have been the best parent. People always put the onus on the mothers, oh yeah, the girl needs her mother. But she actually needed her father. She needed her father. She needed that community to really become who she is. And so that's really, if there's any message or any takeaway from that irony, I would think it's that, the fact that, Roy rose up to be that person, that True, that was the best person to raise True, with all her queerness and her gender nonconformity.
Yeah, and they grow together, right? And he allows himself to be, those moments when you love someone and you're completely charmed by them outside of your expectation, and those moments happen, and his heart opens up in these beautiful ways, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting too, talking about going back to your first conversations about tropes. I did write Roy as that Jamaican man in terms of the trope, right? Like, hyper masculine. He has his women. He has all these things that drove Marva crazy. His current partner. But at the same time, he kind of stepped up as this father, like he ought to be. Because people always, commend men so well on being fathers. Like, oh my God, he's pushing a stroller. Right. Oh, let's celebrate him. I'm like, he ought to be doing that. Right. But yeah, Roy in this case stepped up to the challenge. He said, you know what? Let me be True's father, and that's exactly what he did. However, though he's looking at his son, who's kind of more effeminate, Kenny. The book as like, well, you're nobody because you're not as athletic as I expected. Yes, I did give him that duality as well.
Yeah. So again, a complicated.
Yes.
Character. One of the things that I that was a source of a lot of that made me laugh the most. I mean, it's a book that made me laugh. Is actually the kind of the image of Jamaica in the minds, in particular, of white American characters who, there's the restaurateur who decides he's going to open a Jamaican restaurant for one visit without any knowledge, right? Or, these various, or they sort of the fantasy, right? The people who Patsy works for who, are taken with the image of the and it's all very superficial, but it's also really, it's a really powerful critique, because there is that like duality of a fantasy and a refusal to see people.
Yes, exactly. Patsy, that element, that minor subplot was actually a continuation of what I started with Here Comes the Sun.
Right, yeah.
That critique of like, yes, wanting to see our country as this paradise, Jamaica as a paradise, Sandals resorts, Bob Marley, Rastafarianism, smoking weed, all those things, but not really seeing the people behind that fantasy. And so really basically in Patsy, that restaurant opened by this white man who thinks he knows Jamaican cuisine because he only spent 3 months in the countryside. And it happens. I mean, I live in Brooklyn right now, and there are more white-owned Jamaican restaurants than actual Jamaicans owning their own restaurants. And so you kind of wonder, like, wow, so people actually have license to appropriate. Yeah, and so for me as a Jamaican, I'm like, no, let me try to at least take that back. Let me make fun of them, basically, like, because it's like me going back to Jamaica right now to open up an American restaurant. Like, I know nothing about American cuisine, but to me, to say like, oh yeah, I'm opening up this restaurant because, oh yeah, I lived in America for many years, and yeah, I still don't qualify. I wouldn't qualify myself. So I just feel like that to me needed some commentatory, because I just felt like, well, let me speak to the Peter Gays and the people who are angry when they see that happening, and then they taste the Jamaican food and think, oh, that's what Jamaican food tastes like. Similarly, they meet Jamaican folks and think, oh, that's what you guys are like. I also get questions a lot about whether or not I smoke weed, for example, and I'm like, no. And they're like, really? You're Jamaican? And so things like that irritate me. So again, as a writer, staring at the blank page, I often, kind of ask myself, what am I writing against? And that was one of them.
And it made me think of the Bell Hooks article, Eating the Other, because it was that character also, he wants to colonize the food, but precisely at the moment that you began your reading with, he mocks Patsy's rendering of her depression in a very culturally specific way, right? And so like you want to sort of consume a piece of a people, but not actually recognize.
Exactly. Yeah, you had him say in that one scene, that, oh yeah, these people are crazy. Like, yes, you cook our food and you pretend that you know who we are, but you're looking at us now as animals, and basically firing Patsy, when she had her depressive moment, he fired her, not even trying to find out, as you said, what's really going on. Can I be of any help? Nothing, none of that. And so it was really cold-hearted. And so I really wanted to get to the heart of that, the irony again.
There's and I want to ask this question that is connected to some of the questions that are coming in from people who are watching, which for me was, I was very aware, and this resonated with me as a migrant, not an immigrant, but someone who moved between various regions, is that there's a way in which you carry home even in a new place, no matter how long. And several of the questions have been about navigating both the transition, but the ways in which you're always both here and there, and in a sense become misfitted in both places by being between places. And I'm wondering, if you could have some insight for folks who are grappling with that, or thinking about it, or for whom that's part of the reason the novel speaks to them.
Yeah, like you said, home is gonna be with us always. We are home because, you leave a particular place, you leave a particular home, and you're really leaving the memory of that home, because that home can change while you're somewhere else, right? So it basically lives within you forever. That image that you always had is gonna be with you forever, and that's yours. That's yours to keep. That's yours to actually, hold there and say, you know what, at least I have a piece of home. And then there's that home of course, a lot of immigrants or migrants going to other places because for better opportunities. There is that heartbreak too of like, yes, leaving the home because there's no opportunity, leaving the first home because there's no opportunity, then going to another home that you assume there's more opportunity, but then ends up, not claiming you as not thinking that you belong there either. So there's a heartbreak of that. So that's really now where you now need to go inside yourself, go inside your souls, and ultimately find that home within yourself. You know, again, you know, thinking about Patsy and even thinking about myself, you know, coming from a home that I didn't think claimed me as a working class, dark-skinned Jamaican queer woman, and then coming down to a new home here in America that does not claim me as a Black person, a Black immigrant, or also a Black queer person, you know. So, you know, so ultimately, where do I go? You know, do I sit in limbo and cry about it? And yes, I've done my many cries, but at the same time, trying to step back and say, you know what, actually, let me love myself. Let me find that home within myself. And that's ultimately where the redemption comes, you know, the redemption and the growth comes. And that's ultimately what Patsy ended up finding out as well. So.
Well, it's I when I had a conversation, this not most recently, but last year, with Arundhati Roy, and one of the things that I said to her is that, like, there's something really profound about when the home you can find a home in a novel, right? So that you can imagine yourself with the characters, and it gives you a sense of possibility about.
It does.
Yeah. So.
It does. Yeah, you know, the interesting thing is that I ended up finding home within my books, with my characters. Believe it or not, like, I feel like, I mean, Here Comes the Sun started it all, but I think what my books did for me, it's my subconscious, it actually helps me to understand my people more. Because when I started off as an author, or a writer, sorry, I was basically, I didn't know I carried a grudge. I didn't know that I was really upset or resentful about the reasons why I had to leave Jamaica in the first place at 17. But when I started writing these characters and kind of understanding where they're coming from, unpacking or classism or socioeconomic disparities, all of that on the page, I kind of began to realize who I was dealing with, you know, and I stopped hating them, you know, because I knew the root, I knew the cause of it all. I knew that they're buried within the all that resentment is our post-colonial scars, and that was really what we've been grappling with to this day. You know, our country is only what, like 60 years old or something. Like, my math is off, but we're a young country, you know. And so when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, there in Jamaica, people were still grappling with that. They didn't know what to do with themselves. And so I can now forgive them for that, you know, and write characters now true to that experience and love them regardless, you know. And so that's why I say, you know, I think my writing has brought me home. It really has.
I mean, it's so beautiful. And I think that's such an important point to how new the sort of the reality of liberation, as complicated as that concept is,
right,
us as Black people. And so getting to an image of what that could mean in a way that is inclusive, deeply inclusive of all of us, is a process. One of the people who's posted questions has asked if you would talk a little bit about the politics around language, patois, status, class, color, education, because there are all these, and it's just drawn so beautifully, because there's this school that opens up the door. There's the way in which, for Cicely, her status changes as a result in part of color once she comes to the and then comes to the States, and you know.
So the politics of language. Another thing that weighs heavily on me, especially, you know, as I create, because, you know, writing Jamaican characters, and I say this over and over again, you know, two Jamaicans would not be talking to each other unobserved and not be using our dialects. And for me to be as authentic as possible, I have to put our language there. Another thing too, a part of me is just being rebellious, because I was taught not to speak patois, you know, in schools, you know, matriculating in schools, high school in Kingston, being told, you know, speaking patois is butu, or ghetto, you know, unbecoming, unladylike, all of those things that we were told. And so for me, a young girl from Vineyard Town, where I come from a household where, yes, my mother speaks patois, my grandmother speaks patois, and then to go to school at St. Andrew High School for girls and now have to know, put on this air like, oh yes, I'm this tush British speaking girl, it was like, it was like schizophrenia, like, ultimately I kind of lost myself. And so now finding myself in my art, I'm like, you know what, let me put it up down there, because let me put my language, which was taken away from me, on page, because Baldwin always says, language is our identity. And to remove that, to tell people that you can't speak your language is erasing who they are. And so for me now, I'm giving our power back. I'm taking my power back. I'm reclaiming it by using patois. And one thing with publishing is that yes, it's kind of it's still risky to some extent, because when it comes to things like translation, it could be challenging. But at the same time, I feel like I still it's still more rewarding to stay true to my people, to stay true to the people on the page and the language, and people can, write. I mean, Zora Neale Hurston went through it, when she wrote the Southern dialect. And I'm like, you know what, people would ultimately rise to that challenge. They'll slow down, they'll get to see the characters and hear them. And that's ultimately the goal.
Well, isn't it such an irony that the entire world in love with Jamaican patois, and yet there's this stratification that comes up. I mean, in terms of a language, if you think about a language that captivates people's imagination, it's hard to think of one that's comparable. At the same time as it gets marked as inferior. So to reclaim it, I think, especially in the context of art, is also to kind of wed the recognition of its beauty to a recognition of its value as a source of knowledge, right, and meaning, and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly. Because even when I used to go to theaters, I loved Jamaican comedies growing up. And people would use patois, but it was always in jest. It was always to like have somebody laugh. It was always caricatures. And so I'm like, no, our language can actually be utilized to communicate deeper emotions. More than a joke or an insult, it can actually communicate so much more. And that's really where I wanted to go with, especially having my main characters speak it to each other regardless of what they're doing.
And the reader at times, who has to stretch, but that's what we expect readers to do all the time with literature. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the questions too, which it seems,
I think you're frozen, Imani.
Oops. Sorry, I can't. You froze for a second. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. So the next question is, oh, okay. So we can hear both of us. I couldn't hear you for a second. One of the other questions is, are there other writers, Jamaican writers or writers from the Caribbean who are current, who are inspiring you, or do you find that like you're sort of in a kind of artistic community with?
Right now, other writers that are inspiring me. I love Sophia Sinclair. She's a poet.
Yes.
Soon to be memoirist. She that's my heart in terms of like, we're on the same accord. Like, I always tell her this. And so there's Sophia. There is also Macy. Why am I forgetting her last name? But she just came out with These Ghosts Are Ours, the debut novel. Those people, they're speaking to those individuals, know that, when we talk about Caribbean literature and inspiration, they have definitely spoken to me. Crystal Sital, who wrote The Secrets, or Secret Lives as Women. She's Trinidadian. And if you notice, like these women, and it's actually women, coming up, telling our stories. And so I really honor those women, those Caribbean women, those Jamaican women who are telling our stories. There's Naomi Jackson. There is also, Paul Marshall, who I will never forget. There is Edwidge Danticat, who is a mentor to me, and to this day, like, she is the goddess of us all. There's
Mhm.
Tiffany Unique, who I look up to, a beautiful soul and a great writer as well.
Mhm.
So there's so many of us, and so I'm so happy now to be in that community,
Mhm.
us all,
Yeah.
yeah, existing at the same time.
When it's that's another. I thought about Sophie from Edwiges Breathi's memory,
Yes,
and
yes,
the yes, right, and the sort of the when I was asking you the question about sort of being in the interstitial space, right, of both the pressures of gender, but also the way they function differently in one
yes,
place to the other. That I saw like that thread of connection in Patsy as well. Yeah,
yes.
and the mother-daughter piece,
I know, yes.
which I
And
think, yeah, go ahead.
the interesting thing is that I had last year for the hardback launch, I was in conversation with Edwidge
Okay.
in Miami. And
Oh,
she asked me, I think she's such a modest person, because she asked me, Nicole, has it ever been done before in Caribbean literature where people tackle mental health? And I was looking at her like, are you really asking that question? Because you did it. And so, and I'm really
yeah.
sure about it, but I was like, Edward Danticat was actually the first Caribbean person I read that tackled mental health on the page. And so I followed in her shoe.
Yeah.
Eyes memory, oh my goodness, how could we not remember that story? And so, no, in terms of a Jamaican context, you do have the generational traumas there, and you do have mental health being a part of that, especially when there's a stigma around mental illness, period. But also, how when something is stigmatized, how do you seek help?
Yeah.
How do you even get help yourself? And that was really one of the threads of a Patsy.
Mm.
Suffering from depression, coming to America, hoping for better, having that huge breakdown, and not having nowhere to go. Especially as an undocumented immigrant with no health insurance, no access to health care.
Right. At all. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I really wanted to get into that, for sure. And then there's True, who also kind of suffers from her own depressive moments, and what she does is cut
Yeah.
herself. And that's something that I feel like it was so unexplored, especially in our Caribbean literature too.
Yeah.
Because people think about, when you think about mental illness and cutting and anorexia and bulimia and all those things,
Right.
you always think, I'm sorry to even I know people are listening. We think about it as an uptown problem.
Yes.
In Jamaica, the uptown problem is like the high society people, that's their thing, but
Right.
not the working class Jamaican going through that. And so I actually wanted to say, well, actually, it's all of us. Anyone can go through that, be it whatever your class, whatever your race, whatever your gender, whatever it is, you can go through that. And so that's really what I was striving for with
Yeah,
that.
and it's so profound because there's the it's at the there's both the day-to-day need to fight to survive, and then also
Yes.
navigating the difficulty every day of living when going through a depressive
Yes.
episode, right? Like that those two things, navigating both, and then not there's this moment, and it's a small moment, but that it felt to me so powerful, where Patsy reflects on how Cicely told her that you have to be careful about touching people in the United States, right?
Yes.
And I thought it was so profound because that strikes me as a huge thing culturally, that says something about a refusal of a certain kind of a part of what it means to be human, right? Like when we reach out, we touch somebody, which is a very sort of, it's a diasporic Black thing to be able to touch
Yes.
other human beings, that it's like an acknowledgement. And, when you're, for someone who is undocumented and who is deeply alone, right, that the story is in some ways a journey to find touch also for Pat, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to put that in there as well. The loneliness of it all.
Yeah.
And then to be told that, oh yeah, in America, people don't, they're not touchy-feely like that. So you have to maintain your distance. You can't say much because, oh, don't trust Americans that way. They could take the business and use it against you. All those things. So it kind of further alienates you as an individual in a new country. And so I wanted to go through that. You know, one may say, you know, wow, you know, why you had to take us on this long journey of Patsy just being in limbo? And I'm like, no, it was necessary. It was necessary to actually take you on that journey, because people who are not familiar with that process of assimilation, acculturation, don't really know how painful it is, how lonely it is. And I wanted readers to sit in that, you know, for lengthy chapters, because it was reality. That was Patsy's reality.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine, I met her walking around Emancipation Park with my wife when we visited Jamaica. Mm-hmm. And she said the first time she came to America, she would actually chase Jamaicans around. Like she heard the accents, and she would just follow them randomly, because she wanted that connection with somebody else, you know. And I was like, oh, how sad. But then I was like, you know what? Yeah, I understand it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's so real, right?
Yes.
This is another question that I think is really good. Is which character was most resistant to your writing?
Whew. Oh my goodness, that's a good question. I think True, in all honesty, I think True was most resistant. I fought with True a lot, in the sense that, okay, so True came to me as first person, you know, and the first person was really this angry tone. And you know, I was like, you know, why is this girl so angry? Like, you know, yes, her mother left, but she's sending her barrels. Of course, that's what I thought at the time. She's sending her barrels, their letters. Why is she so angry? So I was actually going back to the drawing board and kind of exploring True more, finding out that, oh, she was abandoned. And somehow then close third person, you know, became more, to me, the best way to tell that story, to tell True's story. But before that, she was not having it. She just wanted to just come out, just telling her story, taking over Patsy's story. You know, she almost took over Patsy's story. And then I had to like balance the two of them so that they both got the chance to tell their stories.
Mm-hmm. It really is a balance, right? I mean, they're both fully rendered. Since you just mentioned the barrel, which or barrels, right? A detail that I love too is that there's, you know, the how to say it, the materiality, right, of what it means to right, like to, you know, to collect items for the barrel, the process of sending it, the lines, right? All of that, which I think all this is invisible to so many people, even in the mid, right? Even people in Brooklyn, right?
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Like honestly, I thought it was a common thing, a common understanding.
Right.
But it wasn't until, you know, my wife is American, and she'd say, you know, what are those things on the sidewalks? And I'm like, they're barrels. And so, and then of course, writing Patsy, and then, you know, having my agent, my editor read, and they're like, barrels. And so now I'm like, okay, not many people know about barrels. So and so just to explain, in terms of, yes, any immigrant will know barrels. You know that that's how you get to send your stuff back home, you know, from products, from clothes to perfumes to whatever it is. And just to make sure that your family members know that, you know, you're there, you're in touch. I described it as kind of stuffing your love in the barrel, you know, stuffing all of that. And for parents who left their children, it's guilt as well, you know, stuffing that guilt. You know, I can't be there for you, but here, you know, here's a Nike sneaker, here is, you know, a nice t-shirt, here's something that you can wear to your prom, whatever it is, for them to feel like the parent is present. I mean, yes, it's materialistic, but in their own way, that is how they show their love, that way. And if I had a psychology degree, I would love to study how that kind of impacts the child in terms of connections to others, you know, in terms of, you know, materialistic stuff. You know, how can that equate to love? You know, so I want to, that's something that I was really curious about, because I myself was a barrel child. My father came to the United States when I was 3, and he would send barrels, he would send his letters with pictures of America in the snow, all of that. And I thought at the time, yes, I was receiving the gifts. I was always able to afford school in Jamaica, textbooks, all of that.
Mm.
But at the same time, as an adult, you kind of ask yourself, oh, but the parent wasn't there. And you realize that they don't really know you, you know, because I came to live with him when I was 17 in America. And I came to a stranger, kind of like Sophie in Edwidge Danticat's Brett Eye's Memory. You know, you were receiving all these gifts, but then the person who was sending the gift is a stranger. And so now having to navigate that part of the relationship, you know, minus the material stuff.
Mm-hmm. And but it's interesting because there's also, and I don't want to, I feel like I'm very protective of the people who haven't read the novel. I don't want to give things away. But there is a necklace, a tiger's eye necklace. And so what's interesting to me is that, you know, there's a question of material things and to what extent, you know, they're meaningful or they can't replace a certain, you know, affection and presence, or if people don't, if someone doesn't know you, do they even know what to give you? But then there's also like the preciousness of certain artifacts, which is really real. I mean, that is part of how we hold on to people.
Exactly. Yes, that necklace. I mean, Cicely, for those of you who haven't read the book yet, this is not giving too much away, but Cicely basically gifted Patsy a nice tiger's eye necklace for good luck, you know, especially when she's going to meet the embassy, to interview at the embassy. You know, she needed that, you know, and so Patsy held on to that. It was so much more to Patsy to have that necklace and treasure it. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, in terms of the other stuff, when True got her first card from Patsy, how she treasured that card. You know, even though the glitter was rubbed off and all of that, she treasured that. And so, yeah, I wanted to show that, yeah, there are different things emphasis that people place on things, the values that people place on things. And so for Patsy and Sis's relationship, that necklace ended up being a lot, because there was a point where Patsy ended up giving away the necklace. And, you know, for very good reasons, you know, for herself, for self-preservation. But it was also a very profound moment, you know, of her kind of moving forward from Cicely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're almost at the end of time. I want to ask you a question about, I guess, maybe a broader question about, that is one of the questions that was asked from one of the viewers, but I want to expand it, which is sort of what changed for you between Here Comes the Sun and Patsy in terms of what you were looking for, what you wanted to do, and then maybe a bit about what you're reaching for next.
Yeah, what changed for me? I think growth. I really think growth, because I think Here Comes the Sun, I came to the game, I was new. I had different questions that I wanted to answer. You know, the question that I had to answer in Here Comes the Sun was, who owns paradise? Yeah. You know, I lived in a country where that was deemed paradise by many people, but to me, being working class Jamaican, it wasn't. You know, I had no ownership of it. And so that was really ultimately the question I was asking with that book. With Patsy, as I evolve as a woman, coming into myself as a woman, contemplating motherhood myself, I wanted to ask that question, you know, what do we lose or gain when we choose ourselves as women? You know, it took me a while to really even wrap my head around motherhood. And I think Patsy kind of helped to unpack certain things. She kind of helped me to understand certain things about myself, you know, to answer all the questions I had before about that, you know, still maintaining individuality or autonomy, even if you are a mother yourself. And also helping me to forgive my own mother as well. You know, for a long, long time, I had her on a pedestal as anybody else would, but not seeing the human being behind that. And I think Patsy helped with that. And so now, in terms of the other work I'm working on now, you know, I'm also looking into motherhood in terms of myself now becoming a mother, you know, fostering to adopt. And so now as a mother myself, I'm like, all right, so that question is answered. What's next? And so now the what's next question is, I have so much more questions about identity, and, you know, all the intersectionalities of that, you know, and so I am going to now use the other projects now to answer those questions. So I think it's just growth. The most consistent things in terms of the changes, it's just growth, me evolving as a person, and it will show in my works, you know, the growth is there.
Well, I just, as a woman, as a mother, I want to thank you again, because you know, it's an on, like, as with Here Comes the Sun, just an absolute, it's gorgeous and honest and true, and it feels like, you know, I read the book and there's a gratitude I feel, because I can feel myself, the most important experiences on the pages, even for characters who are in many ways different from me, but also so I identify with so profoundly. So
thank you.
And it's also just wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Imani. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you too so much to Imani and to Nicole. I'm just in awe of both of you. What an amazing conversation. I'm so grateful to be able to listen, and I know so many people in the audience were loving being a part of this. So thank you for doing this. We're so happy to celebrate the paperback publication of Patsy. We put the link there in the chat. You can get it from Greenlight Bookstore. And Nicole, we wish you the best of success with this book and can't wait to see what you have next.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.